and welcome to the Blockleaders podcast with me, Gillian Gotzel. And today I'm delighted to have as my guest Amar Bedi, who is the CEO of Tashi Protocol. Amar, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Gillian. My pleasure on being here.
No, I'm delighted. Now, we've got a really interesting show today because the Tashi Protocol is fascinating. But can you tell me a little bit about your background, please, and how you got into Web3 gaming and Web3 protocols?
Absolutely. So I've been in the startup scene for about 15 years now. I started my professional career in finance. So worked in consulting and investment banking as was common back then about 15 years ago. And at that time, I got an opportunity to work with this Malaysian fund, helping to set up and scale startups across Southeast Asia. So I joined their team in India and moved to Singapore and grew their presence across Southeast Asia. So set up their office in Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, China. So back then they were doing a live video streaming business, and I was the guy on ground responsible for scaling that to 1 million monthly active users. So all the kind of fun stuff back in 2015, 16, the early days when people didn't really even talk about Web 2 versus Web 3. So I was in primarily the Web 2 side of things for majority of my career. So I ended up with Uber for a while, helped them scale their driver operations, joined Grab in their B2B side of the business, scale their B2B business to $100 million in revenue, ended up with my own startup. And during that time, I think that was the 2020, 21 boom that Web3 was kind of coming up with the whole NFT phase. That when I was running my startup, which was a marketplace for freelancers, I got introduced or fully involved in the Web3 side of things. So I think before that, I was more a spectator. At that time, I was introduced to this book called The Sovereign Individual by a friend of mine, which kind of really changed the way my brain was wired in some ways. And I could see how the wheels were really turning. And, that saying, this is just an idea whose time has come. I think there's a lot of truth that Web3 holds in there. And it made me understand or see it in a lens where I think people who are in a professional side of things like to or think about 2 or 3 years. And what that book did, and even though it was written in the 90s, it was talking about like life in 500-year cycles or, even decades of movements, right? So I could definitely see that the ethos of Web3 would definitely have a significant impact in our lifetime, right? So what we talk about Web2 versus Web3 right now, in a maybe 2 decades time, that will not exist, right? A lot of things would be decentralized. There's a lot of evolution that I could see happening. So I got involved in the whole NFT side of things, did my own NFT project, met my existing co-founders back then, and they were building Tashi Protocol. So I became their first hire to come in and help scale the business out because I think my background is more as a venture builder, and they were looking at someone who could take this idea and bring it to fruition. So that was my early journey into the whole Web3 ecosystem. And I think I've been hooked on since then and just gone deeper and deeper into things.
Yes, because Tashi Protocol is quite a technical project. It's not an NFT sales project, but you have very strong co-founders and technical, or the founders are very technical. So you're leveraging on their experience as well.
Absolutely. So my 2 business co-founders have been in blockchain for about 10 years, and they also had that fund that gave them some insights into how Web3 was evolving. And they took some of those insights into what became Tashi today. And my technical co-founder, Ken, who's our CTO, has also been an OG. He was held very senior positions in Hedera Hashgraph. So he also has a very wide view in terms of what we would like to call how do we make Web3 technology more adoptable by the mass person. So combining the business insights along with how do we apply tech to the masses, that kind of became the ethos as Tashi was created.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a couple of technical questions, but I'd like to get the English answers so people who aren't devs will understand. So Tashi Protocol is concentrating a lot on gaming. So you often interchange the name Tashi Gaming, although it's more than just a gaming engine. But can you explain how your consensus protocol layer enhances the speed and efficiency of Web3 gaming applications compared to traditional gaming infrastructure? So how does that work?
So I think let's look at it from an overall perspective, right? Because what Tashi is doing is a paradigm shift. So it's not really an apples to apple comparison. It's more like apples and oranges. So when we talk about traditional infrastructure, which is centralized, you have the cloud in the middle, which is typically what most game studios use. So if there's a multiplayer game happening and people are playing with each other, you have the cloud in the middle. The biggest problem cloud had was cost. It's prohibitively expensive, and that has massive implications when you're running a large studio, right? So up to 20 to 40% of your gross revenue for a studio goes towards your cloud costs. Then the evolution of Web3 came in with a lot of promises, which still hold true today. But one of the key problems that Web3 paradigm, which right now is around fully on-chain gaming, is that it does not offer the latency that the existing games need, right? So if you're playing a live game, you need the game to be as fast as the blockchain. So if you look at Bitcoin, which is in the minutes, Ethereum, which is in tens of seconds, and then you have the faster like L2, like Polygon, which is less than that, but still it's slow enough. So Tashi has gone and done a different paradigm. So what we've built is what you call fully on DAG gaming, and we've gone that way because the blockchain, as it's known, does not support that latency that gaming requires. So we've solved for that by building a protocol that is specifically catering to the gaming industry. And what our protocol really does is that it allows players to stay in sync with each other with latency below 50 milliseconds. So that is really, really fast when you think about it. So typically for a multiplayer game, anything under 100 milliseconds is fine, right? Your game does not go out of sync. So it compares with centralized infrastructure. So the experience is similar to what a Web2 gamer would have. And that's what we're striving to achieve.
Excellent. And that speed thing, you're right, because I know a lot of the complaints of gamers is that it's too slow. It's not, we're clicking here and then things are crundling along.
Yeah.
So tell me more about how does your protocol prevent cheating and ensure fair gameplay in a decentralized environment?
Absolutely. So just to kind of dive deeper into the protocol. So we are, in a simplistic term, what you call like a gossip protocol. So assuming there's 5 of us and, who're connected online and playing a game with each other. So we have what you call the peer-to-peer architecture. So all of us are connected to each other. And what Tashi enhances on top of that is they add the consensus layer, which is what enables the trust and stops cheating. How we do that is that all players are sending small packets of data to each other at all given points of time. So I am aware of what you should be doing, not directly from what you tell me, but from what the other people are also telling me about what you are doing, right? So if you press shot, the shoot button, and 5 people in the room know that, if you kind of act in a different way, then we know something is off, right? So if you press the shoot button towards me and suddenly I don't die, and all 4 people saw you pressing, I've shot Amar and Amar is still alive, that means Amar is trying to do something funky, right? So that's kind of the core way that we're really solving for cheating. So that in the gaming world is something that you call state edit cheats. So I hopped in there and I basically edited my state, made it seem like I actually didn't get shot. And our protocol requires 2/3 of the players to essentially enable the state sync, right? So if 2/3 of players saw me get shot, then the game should basically make sure that I was shot. And it kind of makes sure that I will, if I've done something different than that, then that will get reset and I would be acted as, or I would be shot in the game. So that inoculates a few different cheat types, and that's kind of one of the core ones that we solve for. Another one is what you call lag griefing. So what people can do is if you're playing from different parts in the world, right? So and your internet is slow in one part of the world. What people try and do is also act like they have slow internet. So it gives them this room for error to show that, oh, it was the slow internet and the internet made me slow down and that's why I moved slowly, right? So because Tashi allows 2/3 of players to know what they're doing, even if someone's internet is slow, the players know what that player has already done, right? So the lag griefing also gets inoculated by our protocol by that means. So I think that's one of the key things we're trying to do is make sure that how do we make multiplayer gaming fair for everyone? So people can hop in and feel that they're secure. The issues that GTA 6 Online had those don't happen.
I was going to ask you, how does your protocol differentiate from other solutions in the marketplace? But there isn't anybody else doing this in the marketplace, is there?
There isn't. So I think we look at Web3 gaming as an evolution. So you had the version one, which was your asset bridging. So you only had your assets, and it was the immutables of the world that essentially took those assets and put them on chain. The version two of that evolution is the fully on chain gaming. And there's a few protocols that are trying to solve for that, but they don't have the throughput and latency that we've managed to bring into gaming. And we consider ourselves the version three, which is fully on DAG gaming, which provides the needs that gaming inherently requires.
You are anticipating my questions and answering them in advance. Brilliant. That I like. It's a very good
Yeah.
explanation. Very clear. So you mentioned the assets. How do you ensure the security of in-game transactions and assets? How do you handle that?
So I think let's break that into two parts, right? So you have your in-game transaction, which is your in-game state moving around. So Tashi is more like an ephemeral sidechain, which spins up with each game session and spins down as the session ends. The same things that applies to the cheating stuff applies to the in-game transactions. So, 2/3 of people need to agree that that transaction had actually happened. So that takes care of the in-game stuff. For the game assets, which is the standard, I would using the word standard, but it's kind of more common in the Web3 gaming world now, is your asset bridging, right? So you have your assets in game, they get settled on a public blockchain, right? So the ones, say Polygon is a big one, Arbitrum, Solana, all of these guys, you're settling your in-game assets there. So we are like an ephemeral sidechain connecting to those public blockchains. So for us, we create a bridge between us and them. So we basically, from an asset perspective, rely on their security. But for the in-game transactions and game state edits, we rely on the security our protocol provides.
Okay, that's very clear. Thank you. So tell me then, what partnerships and collaborations have you established with other companies to forward this movement?
So we look at this in, I guess, a few different buckets. So we have a lot of large infrastructure partners. So there's a lot of players who are in the gaming space. There's Aether, which is a very strong partner. That's the leading decentralized GPU provider. There's RAS players like Orflare that are partners. We're part of NVIDIA's Inception program that, other folks in the GPU space. Then we have larger gaming partners. So there's a company called Fungible, which is like the IMDb of Web3 gaming. We partners with them. They have 750 Web3 games. So there's a couple of very large, players that have long lists of Web3 games, and we partnered via them. So the B2B2B route. And then we're going directly to games as well. We're actually in the process of building a larger ecosystem offering. So launching our own fund launchpad, essentially bring the games on board and provide them more value and added services than just our services. So that's been one of the key things in bringing some of the Web3 games that we've tied up and done MOUs and POCs with.
That is very interesting because obviously you're not a game studio, so you don't want to be.
Yes.
Well, maybe you do in your spare time, but so it makes a lot more sense where established games are there to come and then put games to port, if you like, to Web3 and use your technology to do that. People have already built up their games.
Absolutely. So I think one thing we learned, and it's been a journey for us since the last 18 months as we went out and built relationships. And we even spoke to lots of the larger players in the Web2 space to understand how are they looking at this tech, how do they think about Web3, about blockchain, etc. And we realized that everyone loves our technology, but as a game developer, building a game is hard enough, right? There's so much competition out there. So when it comes down to making choices around the infrastructure piece, all they care about is what is easy for me and what's the value they bring to the company. So that's been one of the inner mottos or goals that we've been working towards is how do we make the life of a Web3 or any game developer simpler when they're using our technology, and what are some other value added benefits we can give to them, right? So that's why partnerships like we have Aether that offers discounts to folks like this, YGG, which is a leading guild provider. We connect them with Web3 games. We have a couple of other protocols that we can bring in and help them connect to get protocol related grants. So we help them out because the idea is that it's not just use Tashi, it's about how do we make Web3 gaming successful for everyone.
So the biggest challenges for Web3 gaming is actually the gaming on Web3, isn't it? Because gamers will say, oh, Web2 or AAA games, they don't exist in Web3, and you're enabling that. What would be, if you're looking in the future, what are the biggest sort of challenges and also the biggest benefits and outcomes of moving this technology properly into Web3?
So I think so. There's a few different personas involved in this ecosystem, right? You have your game developer, you have your game publisher, then you have the player themselves, then you have infrastructure providers like us. So we all have different problems and different ways that we are solving them. And I think when all of this comes together, it grows the ecosystem. So I'll kind of like touch on each of these separately, right? So for game developers, they are looking for ease of use and technology, right? How do I use a technology that's easy, and how is it cheaper for me, right? Cost is a big factor here. So that's why we, as a protocol that is gasless, we are significantly cheaper than anything else out there. And we save about 50% of the cloud compute cost in comparison to your centralized option, right? So there's a real value prop. For the players, they care about the easiest or the best game, right? Like that's about it. The biggest problem Web3 has had so far is, how do you onboard someone? You have to connect a wallet. Wallets are not ubiquitous yet. What if you lose your wallet fees? People are scared about that. So we are building something which is decentralized ways to get their keys back. So essentially, their friends can help them get their keys back in case they lose them. So you have to think about all those friction points for different people in the ecosystem, right? Then you have your publisher that essentially cares more about how successful can that game be. That's where the ecosystem part comes into play. So building the whole Web3 gaming ecosystem. And that's why publishers are more keen to say, work with this infrastructure provider because they'll provide XYZ value props to you. So everyone thinks about it in a way that's meaningful to them. So we kind of looked at each persona and understood their friction points and brought them all together and solving them in a holistic manner.
Wow, that's amazing. So make no friction. It's kind of like the motto of
yes.
Isn't it? Make no friction, do no friction.
Exactly.
Let there be no friction.
Yeah.
So people want to find out.
So that's.
Sorry.
Sorry, I think that's our Ken, our CTO Ken says that all the time, and I think we've adopted that. It's our Hippocratic oaths that we add no friction, right? So Web3 so far has said that you get these value props, but you have to go through A, B, C, D, E, right? And people are like, yeah, I don't want to go to A, B, C, D, E to get to that point, right? So we're like, how do we get you to that promised land? Because everyone understands and agrees those benefits are there, right? Cost saving is a real value prop. Owning your assets is a value prop. Having a large ecosystem is a value prop. Can you get all of those without the friction points?
And if people want to find out more, where should they go to find out more about Tashi?
So our website, so www.tashi.gg. You can also see our roadmap on our docs over there. We have a lot more things coming up. So we've been a company that's been building more in stealth for the last 1 year. And I think we've now adopted the Web3 way of building, where we're now building a lot more in public. So me and Ken have started holding Twitter spaces every week. So anyone can join them. So Ken hosts them on Tuesdays, I host them on Thursdays. So come learn about our technology in one of our Twitter space chats.
Perfect. Thank you very much indeed for your time today, and add no fiction. Brilliant.
Thanks a lot.